Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Betty. Let the record show that we met in executive session to consider collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. We're going to start with a recognition. So I'm going to ask Trustee Commander if she'll come up. Getting a pen? Of course you are. You're mine. You're nice. We're going to stand up here.
Set? Okay, so it is with pride and pleasure that we recognize and salute the Seacliff Glen Head Herald Gazette Person of the Year tonight. Joanna Commander has been a member of North Shore's Board of Education since 2014, and she was elected to her second term just this past spring. A fierce advocate for children, she has focused her efforts on equity issues across the district and has been uniquely involved in ensuring that our athletic program is of the highest quality, that our students are competitive, that they learn, and most importantly, that they have fun. Her work to ensure that the experiences of our female athletes equate those of our males is also of high importance to her. Most recently, Joanna has been a driving force and founding member of North Shore's Coalition Against Substance Abuse. In her words and in her actions, she is deeply moved by the impact that drugs and alcohol have had on our youth, and in her role, she is a vocal advocate who puts her expertise, and may I say fiery drive, into all of her work and all that she does. So it is for these reasons and many more that we recognize your fine work, and thank you on behalf of our students, our faculty, our administration, and our Board of Education. Congratulations.
Thank you.
A North Shore pen. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank my colleagues on the board for taking the time to recognize me tonight. And I want to thank Mrs. Simon for writing a very beautiful article. We spent a good part of the afternoon together, and I think that she really captured a lot of essence. Let's just say that. I have always felt it was my personal responsibility to contribute to my community, and this was a very wonderful community to get immersed in 12 years ago when I moved here. I joined the Booster Club. I met Steve Graber, Maria Augerman, Steve Leone. These are people who are still my friends, which is a wonderful experience. My first year of retirement, coached 17 8th grade girls, and I was a varsity basketball coach for years in my life, so that was really an experience for them and me, I'm sure. My work on the board, and certainly the coalition, has just provided me with an opportunity to address the issues that I think are so very, very important. So winning this award was I'm very deeply honored, and I thank all of you who have the opportunity to work with you and have that relationship with you. So thank you very
much. Okay. So let's have our SGO report first. Is that okay with you? Okay.
Happy New Year. We first want to recognize actually one of our closest friends, Audrey O'Brien, on her accomplishment in being a semifinalist in Regeneron. I think I said that right. That's awesome, amazing. So we also want to talk about for Sports Night coming up in February. This year, like we did last year as well, we are doing a canned food drive. So we are just starting to organize that.
And Island Harvest, like, is the company that we donate the cans to, and they've never had as many cans donated as we in North Shore donated last year, so we're gonna try to top that this year. Got a little out of control. There was like cans all in front of the gymnasium, but it was really cool. Also, the Acoustic Cafe, which was last Friday, has been moved to February 2nd. Thanks to the snow days. Thank you for that. And we liked your snow day challenge. We attempted it, but the Acoustic Cafe is really cool. Anyone is welcomed. I don't think there's an entry fee. If anything, it's $5. Emily's actually singing in it if you want to go cheer her on. But it's really cool. Everyone, it's all student run and student performed, and some of the teachers even get involved.
And this year they're doing also poetries as well, so in between all the music.
And then also, we have been working on the senior play throughout the last couple of weeks, and the senior play is actually taking place next Friday and Saturday night.
At Glenwood Landing.
Yeah, so that's going to be cool. And then the musical is kind of underway. They've casted everyone, and it's Legally Blonde if you don't know. And so look out for the dates for that, because I think it's going to be a really good show.
And yeah, that's it for today.
All right, thank you. Okay. So we'll move on to the general discussion on the 2018-19 budget process and status.
Sure.
Okay.
So thank you very much. The budget process that we go through is probably one of the most time-consuming, but also one of the most important things that we do over the course of the year, as it sets the stage for the work that we do. It staffs our program. It buys our supplies. It helps to bring in all of the new important initiatives that we work on in the district, and that process, believe it or not, starts in around October. So we open the fiscal year in July, we welcome students back in September, and about 6 weeks later, we're already planning how we're going to fund our budget for the upcoming school year. So with that, Olivia and I have been framing out what is important, how do we communicate what we feel that we need to support our program, what that will cost, how that supports the district goals, how what we come to the board with supports the shared valued outcomes, helps really substantially move the program forward in ways that we wouldn't be able to do without the budget. So we this year we are revising our budget book, and that is all going to be coming to the board in February. What the board and the community will have is not only a very detailed budget with the request for expenditures, how that gets balanced against revenues, but also a narrative that will support why what is in those lines is important and what's being asked for. So all of those budget requests come in from all across the district, all the schools, all the directors, all the teacher leaders, and then we take everything in, we ask them lots of questions, we take some things out of the budget as we're, having those initial conversations. And then Olivia and I take all of that and we start to really dig into that budget line by line by line. I will say to you that since from the initial budget request to where we are today, we've taken out $1.5 million out of those initial requests. That does not mean that we've taken the budget as $1.5 million less than the $102 million that we're currently operating under. That means that from the initial asks, we've taken out $1.5 million, and we still feel like we're in a very good place. That said, we still have a little bit of a ways to go. And there are some major unknowns that one of the reasons why I had asked the board at our last meeting or 2 meetings ago if they would be willing to push this process out by a month was because there are still some major unknowns that we don't have. For example, the CPI, which is the consumer price index that gets published for school districts, we don't have that until the end of January. And the reason why that makes it hard to prepare a budget is because in the absence of the CPI, we can't calculate the tax cap. So the tax cap legislation directs that budgets can only be raised 2% or the CPI, whichever is lower. So we have to calculate what that tax levy, what the cap will be, and that cannot happen until we have that number. The second part of what makes a budget hard to deliver to the board and the community in the middle of January is that we don't have state aid. The initial runs from state aid. So the governor will release his budget. I think it's January 18 is when he's prepared to release his budget. And in that budget are his school aid runs. And so they usually go up a little bit. They generally don't go down, and then they generally go a little bit more up from there. So it's hard to project out what that state aid number will be at this point in time when we don't have the governor's runs. So that will inform the budget as well. And then the most important part of why the extra time is beneficial for us and too soon for us to really release a lot of numbers is simply because we don't have a lot of staffing numbers yet. So right now, the middle schools, if you have middle school children, you know that they are in the process of picking their elective programs. That all happens by the end of this month, so then we know how to staff our teacher programs based on that, and we'll make decisions about which electives will run, which electives will not run, based on student enrollment. The same will ring true for the high school. And the high school is obviously the consequences around staffing at the high school are much more substantial. So those will, and the courses will go out, the course catalog will go out, and students will start to pick their courses as well. So what I wanted to do for the board tonight is just give you a general overview of what we have done thus far. So we have all of our budget requests in. We are looking at how to balance the revenue and the expense requests. We anticipate using, in addition to state aid, our reserves to offset the levy. We anticipate using fund balance like we have done in the past to offset the levy. And as I said, we're about $1 million off from where we think we need to be in order to get to a place where I would feel a little bit more comfortable with the budget. There are some major drivers in the budget that I think the board should be aware of. So when you think about
Oh, did you just go off? Yeah, I think you turned it off.
Thank you. So of all the money that creates the increases in the budget, it comes, believe it or not, from very few codes. Where does it come from? It comes from instruction, mostly, in contractual salaries. So for right now, if we were carrying over our staff from this year into next year, that represents about $1.75 million of dollars that have to be bridged. And supervision, $175,000, and health insurance is about an $835,000 increase from this year until next year. So there are some very big numbers that we don't have a lot of control over that we have to bring in, and then we have to figure out how to offset those expenses. So with the major increases in the budget, those sort of amount to about $3.8 million in rough terms of things that we really just simply can't control. And then and those are just those are just increases. That doesn't represent the baseline of where we start. So what I think what I know will happen over the next bit of time is, and these numbers will change. I guarantee you the numbers that I gave to you tonight, they will change probably 3 times tomorrow, because we'll make tweaks and adds and additions and shifts, and we'll get more information about a revenue source or an expense that will come in. And then even after I bring the board the budget in February, that I expect that process to also to be iterative over the course of time before the board adopts a budget, because numbers will change as through between February and the end of March, and we want the board to be able to make to adopt the most precise budget that you can adopt. So I'll take some questions in a minute on this, but what will happen next is the next time we meet, I'll probably have a little bit more information from you. I'll probably be closer to a CPI number. I will definitely have state aid run, so I'll be able to be able to share what those numbers are and if that has helped bridge the gap at all between what we need and what we can afford. And then after that, on February 8th, we'll really start to dig into what are the enrollment projections for next year, what are our transportation needs, what do we need to run our facilities, and then move from there into the instructional parts of the budget. So March 1st, we're going to really dig into the instructional program. You'll get a real sense of what's happening with professional development, what's happening in curriculum renewal, what's happening with regard to special education and athletics. And then after the meeting after that, we'll talk about employee benefits and debt service and more of our revenue sources. But we'll also really take a look at our reserves that night, because we'll want to, what we want to do is we want to offset our spending with the use of reserves to the extent that we can. And we have to be careful about that, because what Olivia and I have been doing is really looking at the reserve, the use of reserve by reserve out at least 5 years or so. So how are we projecting the use of these reserves? Because what we want to be able to do, it's always when you have a budget gap, one of the things that when you have like the devil and the angel on your shoulder, and the devil is saying, take it and just do it and be done with it, and the angel is saying, no, if you do that, you have to find it next year. Well, that's how it works. So if we take a big chunk out of our reserves to offset the levy, that will solve the problem right now. But if I don't have that exact same amount of money in the 1920 budget, then I will have created a hole that I have to fill, and there are two ways to fill that. Essentially, either reducing staffing and program or increasing the levy. So we want to make sure that what we do is even and appropriate over the course of time. So that we'll have a lot of good information for you on that night, and we'll be able to really show you what is the state of our reserves and what is our projected use for them. So you will never feel the blunt impact of one coming off. So that is the process of where we'll take this. Okay.
So let's open up to questions.
Any
from the
questions
board.
from the board?
Sarah?
So, to make sure I understand, this seems challenging. We're saying we've got an increase of 1.27 million that the state has given us just in pension and healthcare cost.
Correct.
Okay, so it is, and then you point out that there's another 1.75 million just to keep the teachers we have.
Correct. Those are just salary, and those are salary increases.
Okay, and then with some other things, we're up to 3.8 just to do what we're doing now.
If we just did a carryover budget, right, with all of the things that we currently have in place, what would that cost? Now, this budget that I've gone through at this point is no longer a carryover budget, because there have been a lot of ins and outs that have happened over the course of the past 6 or 7 weeks. But there isn't a lot of new staffing in this. So we're looking at those staffing requests. So, for example, we have requests to support additional reading. We have requests to support additional Mandarin. We have requests to support additional ESL services. So then we look at what those needs are. We look at what the existing staff that we have, and then can what we have cover cover the need that we have in another place. So that's all of what's at play here.
And then likewise, on the revenue side, we're guessing maybe we can get 340,000 more in state aid. So it's not parallel. I had some requests too. Going forward on the revenue side, will we get multi-year projections on the revenue side? Like
Yes,
we
you
do on
will.
the expense side?
Yes, you will.
That'd be great. I understand it's challenging and there'll be a lot of caveats, but that's great. Can we get more detail this year on miscellaneous receipts?
Sure.
On the revenue side? It's not an enormous number, it's 400,000, but
Absolutely.
I think that would help us see a little better all the pieces.
Yep. And one thing I did learn in coming to Nassau County from Westchester County is that in Westchester County, school districts receive 0.5% of the sales tax revenue from the county, and that is not the case in Nassau County. We don't get anything in sales tax. Because I kept looking through the budget, where is the sales tax? Where's the sales tax? And Olivia said, we don't get sales tax. And I said, that can't be possible. Where is the sales tax? And Nassau County does not give the district sales tax. And the reason for
Maybe
that
you
is,
should implement that.
I would love that, right? I would love that. And Nassau County's tax is high.
I know.
So the reason for that is because they guarantee the taxes.
We'll
So,
do that. And then my only other question on the revenue side, when we say interfund transfers, we mean money from other reserves, not otherwise listed.
correct. Correct.
That's me. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else? Rich? Joanna?
Sure.
Rich?
Yeah. I understand what you're saying in terms of staffing, because that's going to be a big piece. Where are we approximately in terms of development of course catalog right now, in terms of flexibility of offerings? Because I'm not really sure if the students are going to be starting course selection right now, if the course catalog isn't readily available or up to date. What is the situation with that?
Okay. So the course catalog is essentially done and mostly hardwired at this point. What we are, the changes that will come to the course catalog, which will be easy to deal with, may have to do with additional advanced placement courses that we'll be recommending. But everything else is kind of settled at this point.
Okay.
That's a good question.
No. Anything else? No. Joanna? No. Dave?
I realize there are usually a lot more trustees
Yeah, I
on this
know.
side, but I'm here. So I just want to be clear, Joanna, Sarah, you clarified, but I just want to say again, the 1.75 increase would be keeping instruction and the number of faculty exactly where it is right now, just with the contractual increases.
Correct.
Benefits, the 835 is district-wide benefits.
Correct.
So that's not part of instruction, that's calculated separately. Instruction is just salary.
The state require us to put the budget together, but it's actually tied to personnel.
It's tied to personnel, but in terms of these, when you say 835 in health benefits, that's everyone who who draws any income from this salary, from this district, including those who don't anymore but have retired but are still contractually obligated to receive benefits as part of their union contracts.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, you mentioned that in terms of the initial process, so in private industry I deal with all kinds of budgets and seeing federal budgets, and I guess my question for you, and Peter, this might be a hard question to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. A lot of times when folks are asked to submit that initial budget, it comes in a little fat, for lack of a better term, meaning easy cuts. Is that where we are? Where are we? Those increases and those things that we've been able to cut the 1.5, have those been easy cuts? Are there hard cuts? How close to the bone are we so far in terms of what folks have requested within the department, within the district?
I would say the easy ones are done. We spent probably a week or two going through the initial pass and taking out, supplies and materials and little things here and there. Olivia and I then came in on a Saturday and spent 5 or 6 hours, and it was so quiet, it was great. And we just went through that. We went through the whole budget again, and we probably stepped up the complexity of what we needed to do. Where I am now is I can't make these decisions independently anymore. right? So they are a little bit more complicated. So the next pass in our development process is to really bring the administrators in and sit with them, and we're just going to say to them, we've got to work harder at bringing the budget down, and make them part of that decision-making process, and that will happen within the next week or two.
Okay. And then I had a couple questions about the revenue side
Sure.
specifically. So all the properties and the conversion of tax to pilots that have happened over the years and are there additional mysteries there that could affect the revenue picture?
Not that I can think of at this point.
Okay.
It looks like the pilot pieces, because we have 3 separate pilots, have settled, and we kind of know the path that what we will be receiving, the estimate. We have a very good estimate on that, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Because,
Even though there's one of them that we're still looking to receive from Nassau County, but as of December, that's the contract, they are supposed to give that money to us, but they haven't, because the one who was calculating it retired.
okay. And then in terms of the new federal tax legislation, are there questions about revenue from that or questions about funding from that? Or is that going to be only affecting individuals and not affecting the district directly?
Well, it wouldn't affect the district directly
Okay.
in that regard. It will affect individuals.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
That made me think of one more question. That's a
Sure.
little-
Sure.
Olivia, do you know at one point the tax reform bill was talking about not allowing municipalities who refinance bonds for those would then
Yes.
no longer be tax exempt? Did that still stay in there?
I don't know whether it's still
We've got to
in
look
there.
at that.
Yeah, but right now, we don't have, all our bonds have been refinanced, so we don't have any one which is coming up maybe
And
6
with
years.
interest rates rising, it's less of a
Correct. It's
thing,
less of
but
an
still, it was a
incentive to
bizarre
refund.
provision.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, so let's move on to the town meeting portion of our meeting, which is an open format. So not unlike every other meeting, you can ask us any questions you would like. If you come up and tell us your name of town of residence. Anyone? Okay.
This is non-budget related, but I'm Lisa Colasiopo and I'm in Seacliff, and I have a kindergartner, and Dr. Chirizo is well aware of how I feel, because I've attended the coffees and conversations, and I think they're amazing, and I just want to commend you for that, because I think having this open conversation, being able to speak to the superintendent is wonderful, and he's been so open and really listens. And I just felt like I wanted the school board to also hear my opinion, and there are definitely others who feel the same way I do. Having a kindergartner and seeing how academic it is in kindergarten is so disconcerting to me, because we have our youngest children and we're pushing them so early to, sit at a desk and read and write and do math that they would have been doing in first or second grade years ago. And I just, I feel like all the articles you read lately are showing that this is not beneficial to them, and more playtime and learning through play are better ways of educating. So my son's in kindergarten, and he gets 3 worksheets of homework a night, and we're in Seacliff, and I know that in Glen Head they have eliminated worksheets for homework. So one of the things that I've asked Dr. Chirizo, and I just wanted to bring to your attention too, is maybe looking at all of the elementary schools and trying to have a consistent process, especially if something is working. If we're seeing that these children who are not getting worksheets sent home are able to master the curriculum and are able to do what they need to do, then maybe that's something we can consider in other schools. And I know there's the Harris Cooper study about homework, which is the most comprehensive study I could find, that shows that homework is, there's no correlation between homework and achievement in the elementary school grades. And the other thing I just wanted to bring up is just, more recess and trying to find a way to let the children play more because we're just missing out on the social emotional. And I know there are other school districts on Long Island and all over the country that are instituting more playtime, especially for the youngest students, and hoping we can do that as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for your comment. Sure. Go ahead. Okay.
Hi, my name is Amy Goldstein. My children are at Glen Head. And I just wanted to say, in regard to what Lisa just said, that I have a child who is in kindergarten at Glen Head, and I have two older children who had what Lisa's child has, came home with lots of homework. And I was doing the homework for them. I find that now that the homework that is assigned is reading to my son, and going over the books that he brings home is much more beneficial, and he's wanting to read and to write, and I can see in comparison to my other two that it's only enhancing his education by not by not expecting him to do these sheets, because I was pretty much doing a lot of them with him. And in terms of recess, I agree with Lisa wholeheartedly about that. If we can even squeeze in even an extra 5 minutes for recess or for lunch, I think that would make a huge difference to the kids, just in terms of the requirements of having them sit all day and focus. Their focus would be better, the teachers would be able to teach better, and the children would ultimately be happier having that extra 5, maybe 10 minutes. So if it's at all possible, it would be wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Ruth Miklas, and I live in Greenvale. Actually, I have 2 questions. The first, you mentioned how the health plan will be increasing over $800,000. I was wondering, do you ever put bids out to other carriers to see if it could be a little lower?
So that's a good question. We actually are a member of the New York State Insurance program, which covers a lot of government employees across the state. I have not specifically looked at what our contract requirements are related to changing a health insurance policy, and I can definitely take a look at what that contract is. But there are some requirements that our contracts direct with regard to health insurance.
Also, I'm wondering, your employees, all teachers, etc., do they pay anything or is this free coverage?
They pay 20%.
Okay. I'm only going by my daughter, who works almost 30 years at PSE&G, and she has to give $10,000 towards it. So I figure maybe not
That's
that.
always a priority of ours when we're negotiating contracts,
Okay.
is to increase the contribution rate among the employee.
Okay. I don't want to.
Yeah. No, I should bring you on my negotiating team.
It just seems like
Yeah, it's a lot.
money is just flying.
It is a lot.
I don't know.
And it's a percentage that is directed to us. So they just say it's raising by X percent and 8.2% next year. And there's nothing that we can say or do about that.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
I should talk to them.
Okay.
You can come with me. I'll
my
take you.
budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
My name is William Schiroldi, and I'm from Glen Head. And you had mentioned that Westchester gets a 0.5% of sales tax?
Yes.
Is that a state regulation, or how did that come about?
It's directed by the county.
Strictly by the county? The state had nothing to do with it?
No. So if you go, because I couldn't believe it, so I actually went and looked at the sales tax laws. and you could see which counties do and which counties don't. Many do not. But Nassau County absolutely does not give any source of revenue from sales tax.
No, I was thinking
Just
if it was a
school
state regulation,
Yeah.
we could somehow
I know.
get that money here.
It's determined by the county.
Okay. I realize this is an initial budget process, but I get the impression, especially what you said, the over $3 million increase in, I think it was health.
No, there's
You have to excuse me because I have a severe hearing impairment, and I lose probably 70% of conversation.
All right.
So it's a little difficult
So
for me.
it's so health, pension, contract increases, all the contractual, the sum total of all of that is about $3.7 million.
Okay. So I get the
increase,
impression
yes.
that we're going to go for a increase in the budget. That's
haven't
my
de-
impression.
I haven't determined that yet.
Yeah, I realize that. This is
Yeah.
an initial a meeting, but I get that impression. And I was wondering, has the board considered any economies by consolidating your schools or consolidating classes? I come from an education background. I was director of facilities for the New York Institute of Technology for all 3 campuses.
Wow.
And if we had a class, and I understand that there are some classes in this school district that have very low census. And in my background, if we had a low census, the class would be canceled.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be moved. It would be moved to another building or moved to another class or another time. And there were economies that were taken that way. And I don't, from what I hear, I understand that there are some schools that only have like 6 children in a class. I know that may be a rumor that I cannot confirm, but that's ridiculous. I mean,
Well, that's why it's really important for me to get the student course requests in before I finalize my proposal to the board.
Okay.
That's the most important point, because if I put the budget out now and I gave it to the board in this moment in time, I wouldn't know what kids were asking for. And so that makes it more difficult for me to determine if I have 6 students who want photography, right? And you're right, I probably would not recommend running a class with 6 kids, and I would probably fold that class, right? And then that allows me to then look at, okay, so if that's a class that meets every day, that's 20% of a teacher. So can I use that teacher somewhere else, or do I not need that 20% of a teacher at all?
Okay.
All right, and so that's really the function of me wanting to get the staff counts in before I can bring the board a budget that I can recommend. So you're right.
Economies can be taken.
You're
And the
right.
board needs to look at that. You just can't operate with 6 children in a class. You need to take some economies. And something else the board needs to look at is the senior citizens, their ability to pay. You keep increasing the budget. The population is going down, the budget's going up, and the senior citizens are in a bind. Now, all you folks probably, you're all gainfully employed, or you're married to someone who's gainfully employed, and you're probably making $100,000 or more. But look at the senior who's on a fixed income, on Social Security, making maybe between $10,000 and $20,000 a year. They can't keep paying increases. And when you add what's happening with American Water, I mean, it's crazy. The senior citizens in this community are in a bind. And if someone from this board needs to sound out those people and make sure that they have the ability to pay. Now, you can say that they have the star and the exempt star, and whether you, I forget what the other one is called. It's not enough.
Yeah, the
They're in a squeeze, and they just cannot afford keeping increases in the budgets. So please look at that and please consolidate, and maybe you can even close down a building and move it to another school or bust them. And you can save a ton of money that way, a ton of money, and maybe the budget will go down. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Superintendent Giarizzo and Board of Ed, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm coming from two angles tonight.
I'm sorry, could you just say your name and town of residence? Thank you.
It's Agatha Nadell. I'm a lifelong resident of Glen Head.
Thank you.
Graduate of North Shore High School, along with my husband, my two daughters recently, former Glen Head PTO president, middle school board member, class parent, Girl Scout leader of 2 troops. I have two different areas I'd like to touch tonight. For those of you that know, I'm involved in the American water fight, and I would like to just summarize how that is affecting the district and what I think we need to do with that. And I'd also like to bring out some points about past and present underperformance in the school, both from my own example and from my kids going through. I spoke with them at length over the break. So if you just give me a few minutes of your time, I'd like to express these points. I'd like to start by saying that I absolutely love this community. From the time I started here in 2nd grade to the time when I begged my husband to look for a house here, there's no place that I would rather be. My husband and I have come home, and we feel blessed to have raised our family here, and we call this our version of hometown USA. However, there are problems in our Norman Rockwell-like area that threaten the very core of who we are. One is the impact of the private monopoly on American water, as I like to call it, and the other is the increasing school taxes and cost per student in the North Shore School District. I am sure all of you on the board are fully aware of Un-American Water, the cancer that's afflicting approximately 4,500 households in this district. The main issues are the skyrocketing rates, enormous taxes and surcharges being passed on to the ratepayers. In the short term, there are pieces of legislation that, if passed, will correct this injustice of the company passing 100% of its property taxes to its customers. No one who receives public municipal water in this district and in Nassau County bears this unfair burden because the municipalities are tax exempt. One of the key reasons people's bills in the Seacliff district, that encompasses Seacliff, Glen Head, parts of Glenwood Landing, parts of Glen Cove, parts of Old Brookville and Roslyn Harbor, went off the charts this past summer is due to the shifting of taxes from the LIPA plant decommissioning. Most people, myself included, were paying in 1 month what we had been paying in a quarter, and the quarterly bills were very high to begin with. I'd like to read an excerpt from the 2014 Northward Winds article with reference to the school district and the legislators. The amount of the tax burden shift at this point is uncertain. However, school district officials have stated that both Nassau County and state officials have given verbal assurances that district taxpayers will, for the time being, be protected by New York State Real Property Tax Law 1803, which limits to 5% a tax shift from one property class to another, in other words, from utility to residential, and by an amendment to the law that has been passed annually for the last several years that further limits that shift to 1%. The questions that I have that such difficulty comprehending with this is twofold. One, who gave the final approval to reclassify the LIPA property from a utility to commercial property? And second, and this is the big one, how could no one at any level of government or the school district or the attorneys who advise it not know exactly who this would affect and to what degree this would affect that particular segment? This is people's lives we're talking about. This is not a $10 or $20 increase. These are hundreds and thousands of dollars in a year increases to people's budgets to have to pay these water bills. And in some cases, these water bills are more than the electric and the gas combined. In my opinion, this monumental error was due to not wanting to expose those that would be most impacted by this tax shift. And if it wasn't that, it was blatant incompetence. In the private sector, if you don't know how much your sales or your losses go up or down in a year, how are you able to run your company? The company's going to go out of business. To add insult to injury, the $5 million the legislators obtained for the North Shore School District, and I don't care whether it's called a glide path or a grant, was supposed to prevent traumatic situations just like this. However, in the most recent letter from the board, and I quote, "While we certainly empathize with our residents, it is important for the community to understand that there is absolutely no legal authority for the district to allocate aid received by the state or any school district funds to specific homeowners or individuals in the community to offset the costs associated with the water bills. It would be unlawful for the district to use the aid received from the state for this purpose." I understand the stance that you're taking, but I have to tell you that no one seems to have a problem with the American water ratepayers in this district subsidizing the tax burden of those receiving public municipal water. To me, this is unlawful. It is simply unlawful. It is a pretty sweet deal for the group that's not paying this tax burden. The tax benefit afforded by the LIPA plant benefited the entire North Shore School District. Yet those who get private water are footing a much larger and disproportionate share of this tax burden, and it is simply unacceptable. In the long term, the bottom line is the people affected of this community are going to do everything, and I mean everything possible, to eradicate un-American water, which is what I call it. We will be receiving public municipal water at public municipal prices, just like 90% of the Nassau County residents do right now. This district will still receive its taxes from the county, but they will have to come from somewhere else, and in a more fair and equitable way, and not from one segment of the population. The district needs to prepare for that in their budgets, because it is going to become a reality. The district also can no longer live in a bubble with an open checkbook mentality. The increase in school taxes, along with the increase in cost per student, is following the same path as on American water, the path of unsustainability. What I am paying in half of my school tax bill is what I paid in both my general tax and my school tax bills combined 20 years ago. That is outrageous. Our family income has not increased that much, nor has the percentage of our savings. I would like to point out some areas of past and present underperformance in this district from both myself and my children, but I do want to pass along some good news, because there's always good news. My children and I believe our overall experience at North Shore was very, very positive. We had the freedom to choose our classes and felt these classes and their workloads did an excellent, excellent job in preparing us for college. My kids tell me all the time, they have friends that are struggling, and my kids are right on par with where they should be. So I'm very happy about that. One of my children's best experience at North Shore was the senior experience. One had Quest and the other had ACS. They learned more in this course than one could imagine, and they couldn't stop talking about it when I was questioning them over the Christmas break. The internships helped them narrow down fields they wanted to pursue. I wish I had this opportunity when I was here. It didn't exist. It would have been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for me. When I asked them to summarize the pros and cons of their North Shore experience, they told me, get rid of IB, fix the gaps in the regular departments, and AP is enough. With AP, they felt there just needed to be more prep for the exams. They said they felt that the teachers taught more to the Regents exams than to the AP prep. That was just their personal opinion. I also found it very interesting that my children felt the senior teachers were their best teachers. Ms. Soltis and Mr. Galati, who's on the board, were often praised for the exemplary teaching ability they gave to my children, along with Mr. Schachter, who's recently retired, just to name a few of the wonderful, wonderful teachers that my kids had. However, there are some negatives that need to be addressed, some of which were the same when I was a student here. And I hope that you'll please listen to these, because some of these things have not changed in 30 years. I want to start with the English department's lack of grammar. My children and I both learned our grammar in one semester in college. Grammar was either not taught here or it was taught in a very disjointed manner. Further, despite raising very avid readers, their English scores on standardized tests lagged behind their math scores. Lack of learning extensive vocabulary in the English classes was another issue. The social studies department was solid, but it still lacked recent history and current events. One of my daughters told me she learned more about Vietnam from the movie Forrest Gump than she had in 1 or 2 periods, which Vietnam was crammed into. Further, as a parent, I have to tell you, I heard way too many times about Mesopotamia, which I had had enough of, and I wish that that time could have been better used. The math department was and still is the shining star at North Shore. I have absolutely nothing negative to say about it, and I felt when I was here it was terrific. Science department was taught extremely well also. But my children felt that some teachers were excellent and others seemed to either not know the material or were unable to teach it to the students in an understandable way. Foreign language departments were excellent, but my kids felt that there needed to be more speaking practice within the classroom. I felt the same way. We had language lab at the time, it was helpful, but you really need to interact, especially if you want to go to a foreign country and be able to converse. Guidance department, although this department tried very hard, we felt it was not as good in guiding, narrowing down majors, schools, and careers. We felt as though, we never felt as though a path was carved out for the future, and the follow-through should have been better. There were lots of papers coming home, lots of emails, but it just didn't flow the way we felt it should have flowed. One area that I have a particular problem with was the, for lack of a better term, teaching ability. I know that there's contractual obligations, there's a tenure issue, but I have to tell you that my ninth year of English was a lost year. It was effectively a study hall. I had a teacher who had several nervous breakdowns and sat in that classroom and stared at the blackboard. I went to the guidance counselor. I begged to be taken out of that class. The guidance counselor told me there was nothing that he could do. I essentially sat in that room the entire year and learned nothing. It was a waste. The district failed me, and nothing was done. And a similar situation happened to one of my daughters in her social studies class. When on back to school night, the teacher came in, spoke to the parents. She had an attitude when she walked into the classroom and said, "I don't teach your kids." And this person was right. My child was not taught. My child learned not one thing that year except to look in a textbook that I felt was below where it should have been in terms of a high school textbook, and didn't learn a thing. So again, one of my children was failed also. Lastly, I'd like to say that there's a meeting that this district has with the athletics and music department about strict attendance policies. This was an absolute joke, telling the students, excuse me, that they could pursue athletics and music simultaneously, as long as they were organized and spoke with their coaches and teachers in advance. My kids did both, but it was a miserable experience, constantly trying to accommodate both departments' needs. Quite frankly, it was the athletic department which was most inflexible. As a result, my daughter was unable to attend both the French and Croatia trips, and my family lost over a $600 deposit because of that. No school district is perfect, and there's always room for improvement. What I ask of this district is to be extremely cognizant of not only the inner workings of the school, but the outer workings beyond the school. I told Ed over a decade ago that he needed to periodically do a flat budget. He needed to increase class size, and he needed to consolidate services between districts. He looked at me with a blank stare. He just didn't get it. I hope all of you understand that these year after year increases in the budget cannot continue. You need to do with less, and you need to do it more effectively, just as the private sector. The only feasible model in the future will be to consolidate districts and eliminate duplication of services. I had no problem if our district merged with Glen Cove and Locust Valley when my kids were little. Absolutely no problem, and I still have no problem with it now. My friends with kids in both those districts have received excellent educations and are attending fine schools at a fraction of the cost. Business as usual is just not working here anymore. I thank you for your time, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure. Dave wanted to make a comment.
Yeah, I just want to comment. Oh, sorry, I lost you for a second there. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for your advocacy on behalf of the water. Obviously, we all live here, so we experience that as well. You touched on a lot of points. There's just one point you made, which isn't, I don't have a disagreement, but I see it a little differently that I kind of want to just express, because I think it's something we hear about a lot, which is the idea that we benefited from a tax break because of the existence of the power plant. I've only been living here since 2005, so I don't have the experience you have with the district. But to me, I see it differently. I see that 80, 90 years ago, this community didn't accept a gift. We made an agreement and a contract with the state and with the Power Authority. And with that, we gave away our waterfront, one of the most beautiful waterfronts on the planet. We allowed them to pollute our water and to pollute our land, and we continue to do that. And now they've put that there. They've let that land sit. It can't be developed. It can't be turned into tax revenue generating property. They cut deal, and I understand your point that we should be on top of it, I've only been on the board for a year and a half, but I've certainly seen us trying to get on top of it, and it's not a question of, hey, when's the meeting? It's a question of, we're not part of that discussion. Those don't involve the citizens and the taxpayers. You see that in your efforts as well. But I think that, to me, what is most outrageous is that that land has been allowed to turn into what it is and to sit there, and we as a people, as a citizenry, have no opportunity to reclaim that. We have no recourse to get that land back. To say to the state of New York, you know what, you formed Lilco, you formed LIPA, you poisoned that land. It's your responsibility to fix it up, to take eminent domain, to take ownership of it, fix it, and give it back to the community. Because if they let that land become developable again, that would solve all of our tax issues, because then they could build something beautiful there, or something hideous there, but something that would generate taxes. So I just wanted to make that point, that it's not, they were giving us a gift, they took the gift away. It was, we had a compact, and I don't think you believe either that they're owning up to what that compact was.
I agree with you fully. My problem is, my block is not most people know is split with half public water. My problem is my friends and neighbors that are getting the public water because they're not taxed through their water. They're not putting their fair share of it. That's my problem, and I agree with you completely. That is a travesty, and it should be, it's not our job to clean it up, it should be the state, so I fully agree with you on that.
Thank you, sorry.
Bill Moser, Glen Head. It's been a tradition to hold board meetings at the various school locations. Look at the turnout here tonight. This is dismal. This does not represent the community. I think by holding the meetings at the various schools adds to confusion as to where a board meeting is held. I was with David last night, and we had to look up on a smartphone, where's the meeting? David said it's the middle school. We had to verify that it was here. I don't think it serves any purpose to distribute the meetings among the schools. The meeting in December was held in the auditorium of the Seacliff School. The Wooding Funeral Home has better lighting than what we exhibited in that auditorium. My suggestion is that the board reconsider and hold all of the meetings here at the same time in the same venue. I tried desperately to view one of the playbacks from a recording made at the Glen Head School. I guess that was in November. 90 minutes of a waste of time. Cannot hear the presenters. The presenters were not working from a podium. There wasn't a microphone anywhere near those folks. Couldn't hear anything in the presentation. Total 90 minutes, might as well just Nixon erase it because it was totally, totally useless. Now, I believe we have a director of technology in the district. I really think this is another example of stupid. Microphones pointed up into the ceiling. The whole point of these microphones is to be able to hear what people are saying. But if it doesn't go to that video recorder over there, up to the website, and even folks that are in the room here can't hear what's being said. I really think the technology here and the location need to be seriously addressed to involve more people who come to these meetings to have some sense of participation in the process.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Mazu Genovese, resident of Glen Head. So good evening. As many of you know here, and I will tell the audience, I was the former school board president during the time of the decommissioning of the LIPA plant. This is the first school board meeting I've attended since July of 2013, when I was no longer on the board. So I have to thank each and every one of you for all of the work you do. So there was a lot of questions that I was being asked by community members about the teacher's retirement in particular, the tax cap. There's a lot of young parents that are interested in what's happening on the schools, and so I have become a resource for some of them. So fortuitously, I decided to come tonight. So I thought that perhaps I could lend some information to some of the people in this room that might ultimately be very helpful. But there is a person in this room that deserves tremendous credit and thanks, and that's Agatha, for all the tremendous work she's done with the water company issue that we're all suffering here. And when someone puts themselves out there to volunteer and do that kind of work, there's a lot of frustrations that they're hearing from people, like one of the gentlemen that spoke here tonight. So I know I don't want to take up a lot of time because I think that the LIPA issue, perhaps with some of the questions that are out there in the community that have been created by the water company issue, might deserve a subject or an open forum of its own, and the board might want to consider doing that. With district council, perhaps with some of the lobbyists that worked with the district, and then this way, I think some of the clarity and problems and questions that people have. One of the things that I know myself from being a lawyer and from having served in other legislative type issues is that when people are extremely upset and they're having a very difficult time understanding how all of these very complex pieces of government fit together, is that people assume fraud, mistake, and purposeful, missing of things. I can assure Agatha and anyone that's concerned of this that the LIPA issue was not an oversight by any of the board members or any of its lawyers. In your statement, Agatha, I don't know whether it's just because the pieces of the puzzle are not clear, but it seems to me that some of the things, that the way you said them is a little bit of a misunderstanding. So I think that, with everybody working together, I think it's really, really important for the water issue and the issue that you seem to think comes from the schools, those two pieces need to come together and be solved, because when you have people that are so upset and angry, you're going to end up going down a path that's not helpful for the water company and not helpful for the schools. What I would like to just do, even though I think this is a community meeting, because there are a handful of people here, there's some cameras and some young parents, is to just give a very short overview of what occurred with the Long Island Power Authority plant. I was elected to the board in 2000, but I was living here in the community. I am also a former graduate of the North Shore High School, and I went to a meeting that was held in Glenwood Landing by the Long Island Power Authority at the time, in which they were building the 2 turbines that we know belong to LIPA that are next to the transportation depot that we built. And before they put up those turbines, they came in and they said, "We have been good neighbors before. We are going to ask for a pilot on that property, and we will make sure that for the longest period of time, you will have the LIPA monies to offset the taxes." At the period of time, my father, who is now 94 years old, was living in the community, was at that meeting with me. He was a former New York City fireman and living on a fixed income at the time, and he said that every year we lived here since 1960, whatever, he expected every single year that we had the LIPA plant in the community, that was a gift, because he truly expected, like everyone else in Nassau County, to be paying taxes that were very different from the ones that were here. So there were a lot of community meetings, there were civic meetings at the time. I was not involved with the school board, and the decision was, and the answer was to LIPA, that we wanted them to come in and put up those turbines and provide money to us, in addition to what was already the Glenwood Landing plant there. I was not on the school board until 2004, but Richie Kessel, I don't know if any of you remember Richie Kessel. He came in when I was on the school board. There were letters that went between LIPA and the school district showing that they were promising those revenues. There was absolutely no indication. We were watching, as was everyone on the school board, and we were watching with our lawyers. We would listen, like Mr. Mosier would listen to the LIPA meetings that they held, and you were listening on a speaker, waiting to hear, watching their agendas to see if there was anything about the decommissioning of the plant, because this was always an issue for our community. And in the meantime, without getting into complex issues, what was essentially a public power authority was given permission by the government to partly become a private entity. And there are a lot of complex issues that are involved with that. Who monitors them? What agencies in the state are in charge of them? This is why this is a 5-hour conversation. But on June 13th of 2013, we got a phone call from the Long Island Power Authority. It was the first time we had heard that they had voted that they were going to decommission that plant. And within 24 hours, we had met with our assemblyman and our state senator. The school district hired a lobbyist, and we worked very closely with municipal council, who's one of the best in the state. This school board, I can tell you, has hired one of the best attorneys in the state. And and she has extensive and deep knowledge about how municipal law works and how the state government works. One of the solutions that we knew would help the community was a piece of legislation that we coined the glide path in order for people to understand what that meant. The piece of legislation that we sought, the glide path, was actually never provided to us. We got close to actually getting it, but we had our own internal issues in this community that actually helped halt that piece of legislation. What we actually have as the glide path has nothing to do with the $5 million that was given to us. That's not the glide path. The glide path is the local law 1803. So that law is a law that has to get passed in Albany every single year that stops the massive shift of the taxes from the utilities portion of how we apportion taxes onto the residential properties. So that is something that we need to stay in place. I am sure the school board is aware of it every year, and I'm sure we have counsel. I have not been at a school board meeting in 5 years, so I'm not familiar with this, that ensures that that local law gets passed every year on our behalf. I wanted a permanent piece of legislation. That's what the school board worked for. We never got that. The revenue funds that we were given for the Long Island Power Authority plan were funds that were given by the governor in a state budget, not as a grant. They were just given to us almost fortuitously. If any of you have been at any other prior legislative meetings with any of our prior legislators, they will tell you it was almost a miracle that we got the $5 million. That $5 million was to offset the ultimate long-term impact of the loss of the $22 million from the decommissioning of a LIPA plant. So the $5 million is not the glide path. It was something that the legislator gave us, and it was not given as a grant. And it could not be given as a grant. And again, we get into more complex funding, how state budgets are funded, how you can hold money. Everyone must understand that school boards have 5 different layers of auditing. And so it is the most transparent municipal government that you will ever see. The school board, for years, it has been a tradition in this community to be exceptionally transparent. So it may seem difficult, and people may be frustrated, and I am frustrated. I continue to be frustrated by what occurred here, because a lot of it was unfair. And one of the most unfair things that happened, and I understand Agatha's frustration, and if she's trying to understand how this worked and how it could have happened, it was basically because the state and LIPA skipped an entire legal process of having to go through the Public Authorities Control Board. And one of the things that I would suggest that you do is Google the LIPA issues. You will find all of the things on the Long Island Power Authority and National Grid site. You will also find testimony that the school district myself gave before the joint fiscal budget committees in Albany. And that testimony is 4 or 5 pages, and it lays out very, very clearly all the steps, all the questions we were asking the state, and all of the steps that were taken at the time. Outside of the LIPA issue, I want to discuss one more thing that came up in this room, which is consolidation of services. From 2005, when Tom Murphy was the president of the school board, and Tom Swazi was the county executive here in Nassau County. He, just like every other school board member, these school board members spend a lot of time that's not in this room. They go to, I am sure, many other district meetings, joining on fighting for state aid, fighting to reduce state mandates, fighting for issues of shared services. So when Swazi was county executive, he put all 52 school districts together because he was frustrated, just like every school board member gets frustrated, about the way that you control taxes and yet still meet the standards that you need to meet. And Amy Byer, many of you know, she was president of the school board. She was one of the remaining members that worked for 6 years on consolidation services. So everything that we can consolidate and share consolidated services with has been done through the school districts. We did, in fact, participate for many years in the question with the state of whether you should combine school districts. The biggest problem with combining school districts, it costs millions and millions and millions of dollars. Way more money than it ever costs for us to just share services like buses, like AP classes, like many other things that are shared. And perhaps at another meeting or one of your budget meetings, you could make a list saying, you know, there's pages and pages, we did it once, of all of the services that we share. Olivia probably could pull it out back of her hands. But so it's frustrating, and we understand that these ideas are out here. In fact, you should come and you should ask the board and you should make them ask this question every year about whether we should combine school districts. But these questions are not being asked for the first time. And so, you know, in conclusion, I want to thank everybody here again. I apologize for taking up, you know, some time, but I think it was a little bit fortuitous that I happened to be here tonight and have some of this knowledge. And I would, again, perhaps urge the board to hold maybe, you know, just a public seminar or an agenda that explains, perhaps with council, some of the background with the Long Island Power Authority issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else? I'm going to close it after that, and we're going to move on with the rest of our meeting after this last statement.
Hello, my name is Steve Washer. I live in Glen Head. I'm also a local realtor, and I'm also the vice president of the Glen Head Glenwood Business Association. One of the things I wanted to talk about, which is near and dear to my heart, is property values. Mostly because I'm a real estate agent, and I think about it all the time. People move into this area for a number of reasons. One of them is the school district. One of them is what you are continually trying to do, which is keep classroom student size small. But what I'm hearing from a lot of clients, including myself, I don't have any kids, and but I still moved into the neighborhood because we liked it for a lot of other reasons, is that it's because the taxes are so high, they're becoming more interested in how the school is spending the money. What are the grade point averages related, and the scores, the test scores related to some of the other neighborhoods nearby? And after doing some research with some friends of mine, we discovered that some of the neighboring neighborhoods are spending close to $10,000 less and getting higher grade point averages. Now, you're probably aware of some of this, maybe you're not, but property values are important to everybody, probably even more important than they even realize until they start to think about it. Well, nobody really thinks about it until they're ready to sell their house. So I just wanted to bring that to the surface, to make you aware of it, and I'd like to know if you guys have ever calculated how much your impact has on the property value of a house. It's a question, I'm just asking.
I don't believe that we have.
Okay.
Or do I know how we would do that?
Well, there's the best explanation I can give is, without being too complicated, it's 5 things that make up the price of your house. There's the comps, there's the location, there's the inventory in the neighborhood, there's the condition of the house, and my personal favorite, which is the motivation of the buyer and the seller, which can set everything, all the calculations off in one direction or another. Underneath location, I always explain to clients that the school district in any neighborhood is about 1/3 of the location. So it's 1/3 of 1/5, so which equals about 6 or 7% of the property value of your house. And that's the best explanation I could probably give. That's a lot of money, especially in this neighborhood. So Carolyn spoke about frustrations and how people are. I think people are very frustrated because even myself, I don't mind spending the money. I don't mind writing the check. I don't have a problem with that. It's the school district. It adds to the property value. It's important how you spend that money. And am I getting the value for the money that you're spending? You're the experts. You know where to put the money. You know how to spend it. You know how to bring value to the education process. But I'm a product of the New York City school system. I graduated Brooklyn College. I graduated Brooklyn Tech. And in some of those classes, we had 35 to 40 kids in a class, and it was fine. So what I'm saying is, in order to keep the cost down, as Bill said, you might have to go where to a point where, and I brought this up in another meeting, that the only thing you have control over is your employees and your payroll. So as mandates go up, in order to keep costs at a reasonable level, at some point you might have to look at increasing the classroom sizes. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to the rest of our meeting, or to the next order of business, which is the approval of the minutes from the, I'm sorry, we're going to do the report of the
You can do the approval
superintendent
of minutes
first.
That's fine.
You want to, yeah?
good.
All right, so I'm sorry, I skipped you. The approval of the minutes for the December 7th and the December 14th meetings. Could I have a motion?
I have a question.
Yep, we do motions and then questions. Okay, so motion, I have a second, and then comments or questions.
Yeah, I just didn't need.
You were there, right?
Correction, I was there.
Right. I'm sorry,
I was
too.
there.
Betty, do you see that already? On December 14th,
It said out
it
of
says.
that. I was there.
He was there. I thought the same thing. That was my comment. Any other comments or questions? Anyone, Dave? No. Okay. All in favor? Thank you. Okay.
Now we let Peter speak.
Now we go to the report of the superintendent.
Very good. Okay. So we've got a lot to do. I have a report on the entry plan, so I'm going to keep this super brief for you tonight. Just to give you an update on where we are, so we talked about the budget. The 2018-19 calendar is being developed. Now, I know, being new to North Shore, that this is late for a North Shore calendar. The reason why it is late for us to be bringing the 18-19 calendar to you is for a couple of reasons. One of them has to do with new proposed regulations at the state level regarding how days are calculated and then how state aid is funded in that way. So where the state's in a 45-day waiting period. There used to be, the way state aid was calculated, it used to be done by a minimum daily amount of hours and then by a minimum weekly number of hours that then had to filter into a sum total of 180 days. The state that leaves us with a problem when it comes to parent-teacher conferences and superintendent's conference days, because it's hard to capture the minimum number of hours in a day or a week. So they are allowing districts to calculate them by hours in a year. And so we've done all those calculations, and we seem to be fine. We're waiting to get through the 45-day public comment period in Albany, and we have a couple of issues to resolve with regard to parent-teacher conferences that are the full-day parent-teacher conferences, so we can build snow days into the calendar. So we're hoping to get some clarification on that in the next couple of days, and we can get a calendar to you ASAP. An update on Littleworth Lane. So the village and the school district have formed a joint committee that is comprised of some local residents who live on or near Littleworth, members of the district safety team, members of the school's site-based team, district administration, and two village trustees, Trustee Epstein and Trustee McDermott, sit on the committee, along with Village Administrator Bruce Kennedy, myself, and the chair of the Village's Traffic and Safety Committee, Dan Flancic. He is co-chairing that with me. We had our first meeting on Monday. We're a large committee of about 15, 16 folks, so we've broken up into subcommittees, and we are looking at signage and short-term solutions to what can be done out on Littleworth Lane, long-term solutions, and then parent and teacher and community education, and then communication of whatever happens. So we have our next meeting is scheduled for, I think, next week. We will come back and look at the work of of our smaller groups and then start to move this forward, and we're hoping to have our work done sometime in the spring. By now, our 7th grade through 12th grade parents should have received an email that the Bach-Harrison survey is being administered next week in phys ed classes. The Bach-Harrison survey is a replacement to the youth development survey that was administered here, and that measures anonymously student perceptions around and use around drugs and alcohol and tobacco. And so we hope to be able to use that information that we gain from that to inform our ability to build program and support the work of CASA. We had, as an update on snow days, I hope you all had a chance to take a look at my snow day challenges. It was a little inundated with snow day challenges, but it was quite fun. We have 3 snow days built into the calendar for this year. We have used 2 of them thus far, meaning we have 1 left before we would need to go into any of the holiday breaks. So we are generally fine. Our strategic planning process is starting to really gain momentum. We had a conference call today with the consultant. These surveys will be going out within the next couple of weeks. There'll be a core planning team that will be assembled in March, and there'll be some focus groups in there, so please, we'll get a lot of information out to the community. And then we're still on target for the adoption of a plan in June. And then lastly, I wanted to echo our SGO and congratulate Audrey O'Brien, who, if you haven't heard yet, is a Regeneron semifinalist, which is the new Intel. So you probably know the Intel semifinalist program. Well, we have a semifinalist. It's the first time in the history of our program. We're super excited about it. I will tell you the title of her work, and if anybody can figure it out, you'll let me know after the meeting. But it's called The Relationship Between Microalbumin Protein to Creatine Ratio and Serum Creatine Concentration in Kidney Function, a novel approach to predicting post-operative kidney treatment. It's very impressive, and she is in high school. So, right?
I was very excited to go to a store the other day, and she waited on me at the store. So my son was like, "That's her, Mom. That's her."
Right.
So we congratulated her. She's really terrific. I'd never met her before.
It's amazing. So she is one of 300 students in the entire nation to move forward.
So very excited.
Very exciting. And then so we're hopeful that next week she'll be announced as a finalist, and that would be one of 40 students in the country, and they get to travel to Washington, D.C. for a terrific weekend. So I wish Audrey the best of luck, and thank Dr. Mordecai and Science Department for their really good work.
All right. Terrific.
Okay,
It's very
thank you.
exciting. Yes. Okay.
And that's it.
So you're going to do, but now you're going to jump to the entry plan.
Correct.
Okay.
Rob, do you know how to get the screen on? Yeah. It's too close? Okay. Better? I think so. Can everybody see? Okay, so it is common and expected that when people and leaders enter into a district, particularly superintendents, that there is a entry plan that gets developed that is shared with and approved by the board. And so as part of my process for entering the district, I developed one of these, and essentially what it does is they are designed to acquaint me with the district, its work, the goals, and position me to start to move the work forward. So what I wanted to do with the board, part of the plan that I gave to the board back in February when I was appointed, was that I would be back to meet with you in early January to report out on the work that I have done. And so it is early January, and here we are. So, if you recall, one of the things I've always said time and time again is this notion of the district motto, this discovering your dreams, is really important to me. It really resonated with me as I was coming to the district, and I'm really excited about what that means. So as I've gone through my entry, it has encouraged me to do all sorts of good thinking about the district. So the entry plan was broken into three distinct components. The first one was the pre-entry and transition phase, and that began when I was appointed essentially that very night on February 15th, and then went all the way through the summer. And throughout the spring, I was communicating with Dr. Melnick regularly, Rob and Olivia regularly, attending some board meetings and Betty Campy, and getting a sense of what the district was all about and how I would prepare for my transition. Now, normally, these kinds of transitions happen in July, which gives you the summer to really get to know folks. In my case, my transition had to wait until August 21, so it just compressed that summertime a little bit. Between the summer and December is really the entry phase of the plan, where I'm out meeting people, looking at documents, visiting classrooms, meeting with key stakeholders, and getting informed. And then phase 3, which is now until the end of the year, is now that I've done all this work and I have this knowledge, what do I do with it? How does that inform the next pieces of my work? So I'll tell you a little bit about what I've done so far. So when I wrote this around some very general goals that I wanted to accomplish, and then more specific goals. So the general things that I wanted to have happen as a result of this work was enhancing my knowledge of the schools, of the faculty, of the staff, of the community, for me to develop protocols and procedures around communication with the Board of Education. Really important to me is building relationships with all of the key stakeholders, developing a keen understanding of the district finances, and then establishing trust and confidence is probably one of the most important things that I can do in my entry. More specifically, I needed to go about figuring out how to establish procedures for the supervision of my administration and then the collaboration with my administration. So all of our administrators work for me, but they also work with me very closely. So we needed to set the expectations for that. I've spent months and months studying operational protocols, meeting with all of our collective bargaining unit leaders, visiting classrooms and schools, studying student achievement really carefully, and then looking at the financial conditions and the operational facilities of the district. These are all really, really important. In my plan, I set out to interview 100 people in 100 days. And I thought, that should be doable, right? And when I went out and I spoke with people, I asked them 3 questions. And I asked them, okay, so what are the unique strengths of North Shore and your school that make you really proud? What are the things that keep us from being all that we can be? And how can I be a person who can help to resolve some of those things? And then what advice do you have for me as the new guy in town? And I got a range of information from pick the range. And so over the course, so my goal to meet 100 people in 100 days turned into 107 meetings with upwards of sometimes 10, 15, 20 people in those meetings. So when Betty and I looked at this together, I said to her, I said, now I know why I'm so tired. But it's really amazing that since the end of August, I have literally had 107 meetings with people on my entry. I've had 13 meetings with civic and government leaders. I've had 9 meetings with local organizations and program leaders. I've had 8 school-related organization meetings. I have done 25 learning walks in each of 5 in each of the schools, and these are times that I go and tour buildings and walk in classrooms, and we spend time with kids and teachers learning about what's happening in the schools. I've done 15 faculty and staff focus groups across the 5 schools. There have been 16 other entry meetings that I've had with folks, and then my coffee and conversations, there are 7 of them over the course of the year, and my evening conversations, there are 4, and I've had 10 state, county, local level meetings. So a couple of these, actually, that 107 is a little misleading because a few of those meetings haven't happened yet. There's like 4 or 5 of them that haven't happened yet. Anyhow, it's been amazing. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I've learned. But before I got there, I also did a very comprehensive document review, and this is where Betty was really instrumental in having these ready for me when I got here. So contracts and technology plans and strategic plans and the plan for 2022 and the district safety plan and all the things that I needed to know how things go, and I went through them all and read them. Documents related to curriculum and instruction, documents related to the facilities, documents, all the financial documents, and it's been really informative. So what comes what comes next and what I've learned is sort of key throughout all of my learnings and meetings was that every single time our students came up, people it doesn't matter who you talk to, everybody loves our North Shore students. They're the first things that people speak about. People say, students first all the time, and it is true. It is the sense that I get of our teachers and our faculty and our administration and our community every time I talk with them. We have a very collegial staff here. They get along. They are talking with each other. They are communicating. They like each other, and that helps to move the work along. As far as what's next for moving forward, people want to expand opportunities. They feel that there are expansive opportunities for students where, we even heard evidence tonight. My daughter or my son could, take really anything. And if we have enough students to run a course, we run it. One of the things that came up very, very consistently was, and it didn't matter if I was talking to primary teachers or elementary or secondary or parents or whatever, was this need to balance academic pressures and infuse deliberately social emotional learning into the curriculum. That came up very, very consistently. There is a need and a want for that within the district that will really inform our work as we move forward. And it's encouraging to have people want that. There is a very strong desire to balance autonomy with program cohesion, and that can feel a little conflicting when talking to people, right? So folks will say, we want to do it our way, we want to do it our way, we want to do it our way, and and don't be the guy that gets in our way. But also, they want to know what we want them to do, and they want to know that experience is comparable. So there is a desire for the elementary schools to be functioning more comparably than they might, and so that is a terrific thing to hear. But I thought it was very interesting that they still want to have a lot of say in how that happens. There was a lot of discussion about exploring curriculum alignment towards assured experiences. So can we build opportunities for all third graders to do the same thing, for all fifth graders to do the same thing, to have a common experience? We see a lot of that at the middle school. We see some of that at the high school, but when you have kids coming from 3 different neighborhood schools, you see less of that. So that was something that came up. Developing academic supports for all children, not just kids who are struggling, but is there a way to develop supports for kids at every level of the continuum? What that looks like? Can it be flexible? And as when we have a system of open access and enrollment at our high school, kids are taking more challenging courses, and do we have the mechanisms in place to support them when they need it? And then can it be flexible when they go? Teachers want to have voice in decision making, so they and that wasn't to say that they felt that they didn't, but they wanted to make sure that that was preserved. Over time and time again, over and over and over again, folks want us to be paying attention to issues of substance use and abuse, and what is it that we're going to be, as a school, what is our role going to be in that? And the question was, what are you going to do as superintendent to help us to move that along? And really keeping the work of the district very focused, very balanced, and then committing to a path forward. So there was some discussion of, and I've heard this in other districts that I've worked in as well, this notion of, initiative fatigue. So we start something, we work on it for a little while, and then we let it go, and then we take on something else, and then we work on it for a little while, and then we let it go. And I don't know if that's true or that's not true. I've heard it in every single place that, I have ever worked. But there was a craving for digging into something and sticking with it for a while before we let it go and move on to something else. And I think that's a very reasonable, legitimate request. And so those were the noticings, what happens for the balance of the year. I begin to infuse all of this, this work. I am I'm not a religious guy, but I really feel blessed to be supported by such a strong central office staff. Rob and Olivia are incredible, intelligent supports. The principals are amazing. There is no finer support person than Betty Campy in the world. And so the supports are really strong for us to keep moving this work along. So we'll look at those 5 district goals that the 3 district goals that the board adopted, and we're going to keep chipping away at them. When the next meeting or 2, I'll be back to you to speak with you about where we are with those goals, so you'll know where that's at before the end of the school year. The budget development process is, we do it pretty much all day. Every day is you're laughing. Olivia is very excited when I walk by her door. Right. So we will continue to work on the budget, and I don't want, and I'm a very serious note here, right? So I want to be very clear about our intentions in building the budget, right? So we heard very loudly and clearly tonight that there is a desire to pay attention to the levy and keep that as low as possible, and of course that is what we set out to do. So we have to balance what our program needs are, what do we do to keep a world-class education. I have I do not see, and I'm in classrooms all the time, I feel that these schools are very, very strong, and I stand by I stand by them. I stand by our teachers and our principals, and I believe that the curriculum is robust and viable and worthy. So we will always seek to do that better. but I don't see the world through some of the same lenses as others might. But I could also be biased, but it's also my job to have a critical eye. So we will do that. We will build the 2018 to 2023 strategic plan over the course of the next several months. I will set out to strengthen all of these key relationships. They are really important to me, and I work really hard at them, and I will continue to do so. I will continue to build trust over the course of my tenure here. And the next piece for me that I have that is like the next frontier is really starting to establish relationships with kids, right? So the one thing that is unique for me and different for me is that I don't work in a school anymore. So even as superintendent in my former district, I was in a school, and I love that, right? So I used to be able to get up out of my desk and, pop around and hang out with kids, and that is different. But so I have to be more deliberate about it. And anybody who is, with me when I'm on these visits, it's when I am the most excited. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is use my Twitter account to do some of that. That's a great way for me to engage with kids. So Snow is a great way to pick up followers because kids want to know what's going on. And I post it to Twitter, and I do my snow challenges on Twitter. So actually the snow event, I picked up a couple of hundred followers right in North Shore. So that's been fun. And then and then the next piece for me is to, and it's always been part of my plan, is to form student advisory committees. What has to inform my work is student voice. And so I'll be working to put together advisory committees at both the middle school and at the high school to sit with kids and talk with them about issues that are going on and what their opinions are to help inform my opinions, because sometimes adults, we're so close to the work that what is very obvious to a 16-year-old is not so obvious to a 46-year-old, right? So we'll start working on that. And so that's where we are. We've done a lot of work, and we should be really proud. And I'm just excited as can be to be here for September, October, November, December, 4.5 months, and I am very optimistic about the path forward. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them, and we will come back and hit this again in the spring and let you know where we're at.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Sure.
Just for the folks who are still here, I think it's important to know that of all the many responsibilities school boards have, hiring and evaluating the superintendent is at the very tippy top of the list. So we obviously hired a superintendent. That's him. And the process of evaluation is something that we're discussing, coming up with those formats. But I just want to share one thing that I experienced with the Snow Day Challenge, which in my house went as far as learning what the ancient wonders of the world were, not the Lego and the snow, and that we had flu in the house as well. So that's as far as we got. But one of the comments that I got from a friend was that she was happy about the assignment, and she said this really shows that at heart he's an educator, and thought that was what was underlying that. So I appreciate that, and I just wanted to mention it.
Well, you can thank her for me, and I've always said that I always see myself as sort of the chief teacher, right? I see myself as a teacher, and I do miss the classroom. So I try to be in them as when I can. So.
I'll add to that, right, what I heard from the community on the Snow Day Challenge too was just how much they enjoyed your very personal and specific responses to all the children who sent you pictures. It was really something. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'll just add, because you took the words right out of my mouth, we are so happy you're here. And putting all that you have done in one place, I know you're doing it because I check in with you often, but wow, it has been quite a full months, and even before you came here, I know how much you worked on hiring the staff that we needed, and the things that you have affected so far, Dr. DeRizzo, from guidance to the new middle school principal, have just, I'm not going to say you have a golden touch, because I won't put that pressure on you, but so far, it's really, really been terrific, and we are very pleased that you're here, and thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for meeting with that. I too was receiving texts during the snow days as well, telling me how cool you were. And my daughter now said he gained a lot of points from this. So there you go. That's the big. You got a 14-year-old's endorsement.
There were so many of them. I think I had about 70 submissions, which is unbelievable. And I was retweeting all of them, and some, and like Sarah said, I was writing to each of them back. And there was a point in time when my son said to me, "He's like, are you going to take a shower today?" And I said, "If I leave, I'm going to have a million of them here, and I can't keep up with it."
It really, like Sarah said, it was your personal touch. I think it was a way for you to, I know we always fight you on Twitter, not fight you, but because nobody gets Twitter in this district. I still don't understand it. Peter was coaching me during the snowstorm on how to use my own Twitter, which I still don't know how to do. But you reach the students and reach the community, and you're right, it was just terrific.
Great,
Just
thank you.
terrific.
It was
So
fun.
thank you. Okay, so let's move on to action item B, which is the personnel. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? Yeah, comments or questions? Okay, all in favor? Action item C, approval of budget transfer. May I have a motion?
Why don't you just read that?
Okay.
Let people know what that says.
To approve budget transfers in the amount of $50,000 to cover water costs for 2017-18 and Teachers College staff development. Ha ha. So water costs, there you go. Could I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
Any comments, questions? All in favor?
So just so the board knows, and I know you do know this, but for the community, our water bills are up about 300% from last year, and
Yep.
we're only halfway through the year.
Action item D, acceptance of donation from the North Shore Community Youth Organization to the North Shore High School. This is a ping pong table. Could I have a motion? Oh, actually, let's do D and E together. We also received a donation from the Athletic Booster Club to the North Shore High School, the donation of artwork to create the Viking logo on the concession building. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? Action item F, approval of special education services contract. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Questions or comments?
You want me to say my thing about the old contracts?
Oh, because it's old? Yeah,
Yes.
I know. All in favor? All right, action item G, approval of an agreement with the Chamberlain International School. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor? Action item H, approval of amendment to agreement with All About Kids. Could I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? Okay. Any other comments from the public?
Hi, Denise Reiner, Glen Head. I'm going to assume that since we hired a new AP-IB coordinator to replace the IB coordinator, that we're considering adding AP courses. Otherwise, that wouldn't be the name of her title. So I know that we're still looking at class selection for the next couple of weeks, although you kind of mentioned March is an end date at this meeting. So one statement from somebody who had her daughter in the first cohort of students that graduated with an IB diploma. If you're considering seating classes and having AP-IB in the same classroom, my daughter experienced that in a biology class, And I just want to say that for the students, it makes a class that if it was just AP or if it was just IB, they're both very difficult. And it's two different ways of teaching, two different methods of gathering information and what you're tested on. And seating, if we're talking about emotional, social well-being, makes such courses more difficult
God bless you.
for the child. It also makes it more difficult for the child to get tutoring in such a classroom, because it doesn't align with an AP curriculum totally, and it doesn't align with an IB curriculum. So that's just something to keep in mind. I know that we have budgetary constraints, and I'm happy that we're going to be looking at the class sizes and class enrollment. I want to make a plea to our assistant principal of curriculum and to our assistant superintendent of curriculum, excuse me. We've already seen, and I was very proud of Principal Cousins when he made his presentation. He was very honest, and he spoke of the areas that we definitely need to work on. These areas weren't surprises this year. We know that we have been weak in math and lost some of our best math instructors last year. We knew we were going to be missing them. We know how we've done on the calculus tests, and I know that this year we were supposed to insert more pre-calculus into a particular course. We have seen over the last couple of years struggles with certain classes, such as our IB physics course. So what I am I'm pleading for consideration and just for you to have a conversation about what seemed logical with our chemistry course, and that is that before a child would consider, let's say, IB chemistry, they actually had the ability to take honors chemistry before, which was a very, very difficult class. But I can tell you, even children who did well in honors chemistry, many of them needed then to drop out of IB chemistry because it was so difficult. We don't have honors physics anymore. We used to, and we don't have honors pre-calc anymore. And I'm telling you that if you take a look at the presentation that Principal Cousins gave, he didn't try to hide the fact that we're struggling in these areas. And perhaps there is a way, without using extra funds, maybe we can move things around, maybe we can substitute a couple of classes. But I think it's imperative that we consider bringing back honors physics being the leg up to a college level IB physics course in order for the students and the professor, quite frankly, to be fair to the person that's teaching that course and taking students who've never seen physics before, and they're stepping into a college level course. And for us to go back to having honors pre-calc. We know that we're very, very weak in this area. And for students who do go on to AP Calc, whether it be in their junior or senior year, I know that we haven't done wonderfully in those classes, and I can tell you that I'm sure that when these students are going on to major in the sciences, perhaps pre-med or pre-vet, they're not really leaving North Shore with a strong education in these areas. So all I am pleading for is for you guys to have a discussion about it and perhaps finding money that's already there to fund these courses. The only other thing that I wanted to mention, and I'm going to use social emotional well-being is this district has been very proud of having self-selection. I remember years ago the arguments of whether or not we should and the benefits and perhaps the disabilities of having that in our district. What I've learned in the last month or so are that there are districts that have self-selection. However, when I have a child in the middle school, an 8th grader, and we're awaiting that letter that comes where I am told what classes he would best fit into in 9th grade. We all know that letter that comes. And many parents, they look at what is proposed, and perhaps they think this isn't challenging enough for their child, or it will hurt their child to not be in higher level courses when it comes time for their coursework to go off on with their college applications, yes. So what I'm requesting is, again, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I know that there are particular districts that if you would like to have your child take a course that your child was not recommended for, you then have to meet with, as a group meeting, perhaps with the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor and your child and the parent will sit down, and your child and the parent will be told why your child was selected for a particular course and what their weaknesses are and what they could perhaps do over the summer in order to best be able, if they still choose, to take a higher level course. A lot of the anxiety in high school stems from children being in courses that they're not prepared to take, and the pressure from parents and on the children themselves of wanting to excel in courses that, if perhaps they were armed with that information, then over the summer they have the ability to make up that gap in their knowledge, and they may in September then decide, no, I didn't really do the work over the summer, I'm happy to take the Regents course. Or maybe they will have worked over the summer. But I think that when you're talking about social emotional well-being, we have to look at what we're doing within the school that hurts that social emotional well-being, and making sure that our students are best prepared for the courses that we're offering them, both in the self-selection and by reoffering the honors classes, like we have honors chemistry before IB chemistry. I think this is something that we have, can't think of the word, but a responsibility to our students to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So, do we have any old business?
The water.
Yes,
We
the
talked
water
about that a little
update?
bit. So
Yes.
so the water update, I think, has sort of come out in parts, but is that, as we've demonstrated, our water bills are absolutely impacted too. So what happened in the special meeting was that the board voted to have our lawyers pursue joining the Village of Sea Cliff's lawsuit against New York American Water, primarily on the basis that we're basically, in layman's terms, we charge them property taxes, they attempt to charge them back to us, we're tax exempt, it doesn't make any sense. So in part, we're doing this as stewards of taxpayer funds, right? It would not be okay for us to say, hey, it looks like we're being overcharged, but, you know. So we feel like it's important for us to make the argument when we're being charged improperly. And it is our fondest hope, but a much more distant hope, that that these lawsuits by these taxing entities can cause enough disruption that there's no way around dealing with the disruption except for it to go back to the PSC and for them to look at how they're doing this whole piece. Then on top of that, there are these developments from the letters New York American Water has filed, where they are now saying that they have discovered errors in how they filed for their assessments with the state, dating back to 2012, that there were a number of inaccuracies in how they were listing their assets. And it was not fixed for a long time. So I think the PSC has been very interested and very responsive in this development, and that's why we're hearing information that there are going to be some cuts in our bills sooner rather than later. So there's some hope there also. And it brings up some of the questions people had earlier about, how all these assessments get done. And it is the state through ORBS that assesses utilities in particular, right? And the county is going to deal with all other issues of assessments. But the state gets that piece. But it is largely self-reported data, right? Like New York American Water is uploading data to the state's system, and that is going to be the basis of the assessment. And that is where they have now gotten themselves in, some trouble because that data wasn't correct. Did I leave out anything else on water?
I don't think so. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for keeping us informed and sending me the information as well. It's very helpful. New business. Yes, I'm sorry, do you have an old business?
It's new old. I'll be very quick. We had previously identified priorities for LAC, and we had talked about potentially the new tax legislation being an area in which we would like them to research. Well, now there is legislation, so I'd like to repropose that we task LAC with researching that and seeing how it's going to affect our districts.
So we will have a LAC update at the next board meeting.
Okay.
We can talk about it with them. And let me just make a plug for Legislative Night,
Yes, I was gonna
which
say,
is
that's what
next
we need.
Thursday evening, to the huge crowd that's still left at our meeting. Glenwood Landing Elementary. So that's it. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for staying.
Thank you for coming.